Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A very warm welcome to everyone to yet another session of Quest. Let us begin with a small prayer. Sarvatma Sarvadrugyoso Sarvadhyasa Nirasakrita Satatam Sannidhattam Me Hridaye Paramashivaha. Today, we have a very special guest, Srimati Padma Neppalli ji, joining us all the way from California, USA. Thank you for accepting our invitation and joining us today, Padma ji. For the benefit of our viewers, I would like to introduce Padma ji. Padma ji, born and raised in Andhra Pradesh, India, is a writer by profession with more than 30 years of experience working in high-tech industry. After working for almost 27 years at Intel Corporation in various capacities as an individual contributor, manager, and director of information development, she took early retirement from Intel in July 2021. With the hope of spending more time studying and practicing Advaita Vedanta. She has committed herself fully to the study of Advaita Siddhanta and other non-dual traditions such as Shivadvaita or Kashmiri Shaivism and Zen Buddhism. She has also translated late Shri Srinivasa Rao's talks from Telugu to English and published the book Not To, The Essence of Non-Duality. I once again welcome you, Padma ji. And to begin with, tell us a bit about your upbringing and your initial influences of life and about your education.
Okay. Yeah, so I actually come from, first, thank you for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to talk to you. And especially to, I'm always interested in the journeys of other people, how they got Advaita Vedanta. So thank you for the opportunity for myself as well. I was born in Rajahmundry, Godavari district, and grew up in Vizag in early childhood. My dad used to work for Caltex Oil Refinery. And then eventually we moved to Vijayawada when I was like, fifth grade or something like that. And my education and all that completed in Vijayawada. So the most, I think there are few people in my life who had a great influence on me. And we lived in a joint family, a multi-generational family in Vijayawada. It's a huge house and wonderful with a courtyard, traditional kind of a house. And my grandparents were playing the role of, the head of the family. But they would invite a lot of the sadhus and sannyasis, whoever came to Vijayawada, were invited for picture to our house. And so I met quite a few of them, but there are a couple of them who had the most profound effect on me, and that was Swami Sahajananda Saraswati, and I think he was from the Divine Life Society many years ago, and we met him, we had gone on a trip to Bhadrachalam as a family, and that's where we met him, and my grandparents and my aunt who was very much into it, they invited him over. So he had come over and he had initiated me at the age of 10. When I was 10, he initiated me into mantra chanting. Gave me, at that time, Rama, the picture that you have right behind you was my favorite. And he gave me a mantra on the Shri Rama. He actually taught me how to meditate and how to chant and how to meditate. And what I learned from him, which was unique, besides the mantra too, was how to visualize the form right in my heart, and worship. So when I went to bed, it's just not that I was deeply spiritual, but it became a discipline, a practice that I did, and I didn't need to go sit in the puja room. It was going to bed whenever, that was the influence we had of Swamiji had on me. The other Swamiji that also came to our house was Swami Vidyaranya Swamiji. Vidyaranya Swamiji has an ashram in Nasrapat. He's no more, but he was actually given sannyas ashrama by Sringeri at that time. That was in, I think, in 1956, around that time. He was given sannyas ashram by, the Jagadguru Sringeri Swami, the Abhinava Vidyarthita, and the name Vidyaranya was also given to him. But incidentally, when Swamiji was 23 years, but before he got into that, initiated into sannyasa, he was kind of roaming around like an avaduta, and he went up onto this mountain and he was saying, Vidyaranyoham, Vidyaranyo, I am Vidyaranya. By then he was not initiated, but somehow coincidentally, whatever, Sringeri Pitadipati also gave him that same name. So he was pretty profound, and my memories of him really was was a very jovial person, and he would even gave a lot of attention to me, a little girl who was so insignificant, But the lasting memories of him was, we would all collect around him, and he would talk about Advaita. He was an Advaita. So this is a picture of Swamiji, and which is very close to all the Nepalis and the Patipandas, which is my maiden name. So that was it. And I think with him, he spoke a lot of Advaita, and probably some of it went over my head, because I was very young. But what left an impression was the peace that he radiated, and the whole environment of the ashram. I just feel that those visits to his ashram and his coming to our staying with us, all of this created a strong bhasana for ashrams and sannyasis and, that sort of a thing. So I think that's basically, those are the two people. And I also want to mention my maternal grandmother, because all of these, now I look back and I think and I realize how each of these personalities who were placed in my life had a pretty prominent role, Like I was in, I think, ninth grade or something like that, maybe 13 years old. And I lived with my grandmother in Rajahmundry for a year, and went to school there. And I used to be afraid of ghosts, and and all the kids there used to talk about all these stories that I was afraid of being alone in the night. Then my Amama gave me such a good trick, She actually was a pretty devout person, not externally like pujas and all of that, not much of that. She had a puja room and a shrine with all the deities in there. She would light a lamp there, but she would actually sit down, and in the wall there was a little shrine with just the picture of Hanuman, and she would sit and do japa there. And she told me, you know what? If you have, there are so many gods, you can worship them all, but pick one ishta, So when you're afraid, who are you going to call? You want to call the one person. We got 10,000 gods there. Trust one, build a relationship with one, call him, and he'll come. And she told me about Hanuman, right? And she said, look, this is somebody that you could rely on, And so that became like she planted the seed. Once again, Manasa Puja. Swamiji taught me Manasa Puja, how to do it in your own heart. My grandmother taught me that too. So this kind of led to, these are, I would say, some of the three people who really influenced me when I was growing up. That's a long answer, sorry.
No, that's okay. And I think you had a very lasting, influence from all of these people. I can see two different streams that you are influenced from. One is your family and parents, and other is all these sannyasis and sadhus who you would visit and who would visit your home. And could you tell us a bit about your interactions with, as you mentioned, Swami Sahajananda ji of Divine Life Society and Swami Vidyaranya ji? And at such an young age, you were exposed to all these great masters. So tell us a bit about that. What you learned from them, and how did it go about?
Yeah. So I think I already mentioned those. So with Swami Sahajananda, he, I think he had a great influence on my entire family, because he actually lived with us on and off. He would come and stay with us. And in fact, I think Swami, never mind, my memory is a little vague over there, but he taught us meditation, and he would conduct group sessions, on our terrace. We had this big terrace out there, and my uncles, aunts, grandparents all sit down, and he would then teach us, show us how to meditate, and we would just meditate in his presence, So sitting still and meditating was something that was at a very early age kind of became not, I can't say it became a norm, but became quite important, or rather, I took it for granted in a way that this is something that every household does, And so that became a natural thing for me. Of course, later on, with life and samsara, his marriage, some of that went back, and I can talk about that a little bit. But so he had the influence where he planted the seed of meditation, gave me that mantra, taught me how to do it. And with Swamiji, Vidyaranya Swamiji, it was more, like I said, he was talking about Advaita. The time spent with him was about listening to things like spiritual matters, what are the virtues, what's the goal of human birth, how can you, that he written this whole book was about his his discourses, and basically he was trying to tell our family, because it was mostly one-on-one with my family, that he would talk about, what are the virtues to develop, how to make sure that you can get dragged down into samsara, how to balance both samsara as well as your spiritual path. So those are some of the things that I learned. And like I said, a strong vasana for ashrams and Swamijis, I think, came because of these Swamis visiting us quite frequently. And since then, I remember even going and, we went to Uti as soon after we got married, and at Kunur, Swamiji's, the Sahajananda Saraswati lived in Kunur in one of the ashrams there. We even went and met him there. After that, kind of lost touch with him. But, these Swamijis brought, devotion, bhakti. It's not just, often we fear God, not love God. And
Correct.
these Swamijis, showed us how to love, and how that it was more an inward process and nothing external that you do with great pomp and glory, but more internal. That has been a common theme, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Hope I answered your question.
Yeah. And I have a follow-up question on this. You were initiated into mantra chanting and meditation at an young age, and you have spent your entire career, almost 30 years, in corporate in various positions. You have led a team, you have directed a team. How did these influence your career as a leader, as a director? Did it have any influence on that?
Of course, I think absolutely, and I think it's an evolution, Manu. So while I had all this influence, and when I was young, I did not have the opportunity, because I got married pretty young. That's while I was still in college, and then finished my education and all of that. So it kind of spirituality went onto the back burner for a little bit. So I struggled with that, the ego and the competition, the corporate world, and trying to be competitive, but that for a few years until I established myself in my profession, especially coming here as an immigrant and all of that. But eventually, though, I think it kind of mellowed my responses and reactions quite a bit. Things, especially that Advaita teaching, put things in perspective, where you would, it was not about, I never had this huge career goals that I want to become the director or VP. No, things organically, I just realized I just have to do what I can do my best where I am, and not try to go look for something higher and higher. And that, I think, was a wonderful, something that I learned as part of the previous, whatever conditioning I got with the Swamijis and all that, it was do what you can do well where you are, and naturally the progress will happen. And that's exactly what happened. And I must also say that, in the last about 6 years at Intel, there's a women in Intel organization, and there's lots of emotion, especially women, I think, in the corporate environment or even outside, they're very emotional. And I saw, and I was a mentor for some of the women, and I saw what they're emotionally struggling with. And I put together a course, and it was called, what did I call it? Staying Present in Raging Emotions. And I just took concepts of Advaita Vedanta, Buddhism, and all that, and built this to our workshop, and gave it to them. And it's not like masses. I always wanted to impact small group, like 20 people, 15 people, and the women, of all kinds, and Russians and all kinds, and all Europeans, Americans, Indians, really received it so well. It was like aha moments, and by teaching that, it's kind of reinforcing, not that I'm already present while all my emotions are raging, but it's a reminder. So I think in the corporate environment, I was able to succeed and keep my calm, and so many, layoff sweeps had happened. I hung in there, I think, and persevered, because I think I was not overly ambitious, happy with what I was doing, and really happy with what I'm doing in a way that I did my best. And that was recognized by people, and I did not get into petty politics in the company and all that. So I think the tempering conditioning from the past helped me in that regard.
Wonderful. And obviously you had these concepts of Advaita Vedanta being taught to you at an young age. But how did your formal learning of Upanishads and other Vedantic texts go about? How did it begin and how did it go about?
You know, I can't say, can pinpoint and say when the whole Upanishad, when I started reading or anything like that, because it was an evolution. And as a child and throughout my childhood, I was a voracious reader. I loved to read. Books were my best companions. And I had a brother, wonderful brother. I had, he's my older brother, Shiva Kumar Patipanda. And he had, he was my resource, and supplied me with all the content, the best content ever, and I would read. And I think initially in my teens, along with my brother, we were exploring ESP, this whole metaphysical, paranormal was very interesting, to bring out the magic in your mind, the discoveries behind the I am certain, ESP, extrasensory perception. These are the books that we read. So kind of curious about what this other world looks like. It started like that in my teens, and then later on developed into bhakti, devotion, gurus and all that. And eventually I ended up with Advaita Vedanta. But somewhere in there, there's always in the background and the spirit of Advaita was in there. But my vasanas, were dragging me to tantra, mantra, yoga, all of that, explored everything, and interestingly, I was really blessed to have great masters come into my life, even in America, where, all the great people have been visiting America, and I've been exposed to a lot of them and studied under a lot of them. So going back to your question, when did I start Vedantic studies? It happened over a period of time. Even I think the first Advaita Vedanta or the Upanishad book that I purchased, Gita, was in my late 20s, early 30s, talking about several decades ago, And, but, I read those, and then Yoga Vashishta, just a few years. I was very young when I read yoga in my 30s, I think. And boy, after reading that, I was like, for a week in total vairagya. Okay, but that didn't last very long, of course. It was just, a temporary feeling, but that was like a blast, So that was when my first introduction to this whole Advaita concept. And I read all of these, but, they didn't really stick until Shri Srinivasa Rao, my teacher, came into my life. When I started listening to his lecture, he's amazing. He's amazing, and he takes you to that Advaita Bhava, that non-duality. And that is where, to me, whatever I read before was one thing, but listening through Jagadguru talk about it and his lucid explanations, that resonated most deeply with me. I heard so many things before, but everything came together beautifully through Jagadguru. So I would say that, it was Jagadguru who, although I've been reading before, it was him and listening to him. It's like when you hear Jagadguru, it reminded me of Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, awake, arise, it's like his call, a clarion call of Jagadguru, which kind of resonates like Vivekananda's call, and there's no getting away. So once you're on that path, there's no going back. So for me, I think Jagadguru was the person who brought it more real, made it more real to me. Until then, it was in a book, Yes, and yes. What was the intuition then became a passion, I could say.
Wonderful. And Padmaji, you have seen the East, you have seen the West, and have been in such a wonderful profession for a long time. How do you think Vedanta or Advaita helps in solving contemporary problems? We speak about inclusiveness now. We speak about so many issues, ethnicity issues. How do you think Advaita Vedanta can answer these questions?
I think beautifully. First of all, I think when we talk, I'm glad you're talking about inclusiveness and very specific problems. Advaita is not going to solve world hunger, for sure, right? World hunger is another big, it's not going to solve, because Advaita doesn't even believe in the reality of the world or any of that. But, inclusiveness and, becomes natural. Once the teaching sinks in, where you're seeing everything is Brahman, it becomes a natural thing for you to, to become more compassionate, to really not get caught up in your mind and what your mind says. You don't trust your mind because you know that your vasanas are creating these vrittis, these thoughts and which are not real, and so you kind of, that knowledge in the background kind of tames you down a bit, and I think your perspective on life itself changes. Religion talks about God, how to please God, how to pray to God so that your life on earth becomes better. Science and technology, which is the corporate environment, is talking about, explores mind and matter, and they tell you, and then always looking for ways to how to enhance your experience on earth, or how to improve your life on earth. Advaita is about you, the subject. It is talking about who you are, but none of these sciences or anything go look back at who you are. Advaita does. So the knowledge about who you are, once you understand that you're not all these thoughts and these emotions that kind of take you over, you realize that the same whatever tattva consciousness in you is in the other person as well, So there is a natural love and compassion. And one thing I learned, I've given classes and taken classes on inclusiveness in corporate world. This is a huge problem, especially with all the ethnic, the racial issues and all of it. It's very important and in fact, we had a class that's called micro inequities, where unconsciously people are, you don't even say things, but your expressions and your body language will already convey, what you're feeling about the other person, and this, I think, you become more aware. This knowledge, Advaita, will kind of temper you down. You become more aware. Actually, as you start practicing Advaita, you will start kind of freaking out in a way, because you see all the yuck in yourself come to the surface, So then you don't, before you start pointing, there are 3 fingers or 4 fingers pointing back at you. That becomes real, it really becomes real. So you kind of naturally temper down, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's in practice.
Yeah, definitely. I think you have answered it very beautifully. And you have also studied Shivadvaita, Kashmiri Shaivism, and also Zen Buddhism. Could you tell us a bit about the similarities and uniqueness of these schools and how they view the reality, ultimate reality?
You know what? It's a great question. It will require a long answer from an expert, but let me try to do the best I can in the time we have. These are subjects that are I'm very passionate about, and I'm still studying. I'm by no means an expert on it yet. So let's talk about Advaita Vedanta and Kashmir Shaivism. So Kashmir Shaivism is also called Shivadvaita, Pratyabhijna school, and like Shankaracharya for Advaita Vedanta, you have Abhinava Guptacharya for Kashmir Shaivism. Okay. Two beautiful, both are Advaita, very similar in a lot, but I personally, my teacher was Ellen Rajawar, who was, a vast knowledge of everything. And he was a staunch Shankaradvaita, but he was also a non-dualist, a stauncher non-dualist. So he used to say, wherever you get that Advaita power, go get it. Leave everything else, but fix that. So don't get married to just one school, Get that whole perspective. So that's where I come from. That's why even though I was Advaita Vedanta is my passion, I have tried to study these other schools as well. And both, like I said, Kashmir Shaivism, they both, and Advaita Vedanta, both believe in the Chaitanya, consciousness as being the absolute substance. Right? I think the difference is in, like Advaita Vedanta does not accept any activity, does not attribute any activity to Brahman. So Brahman consciousness is just consciousness, And they say that what you see is an illusion. The world is an illusion. And this comes about when consciousness has this inherent power in it. And that power is what manifests itself like that. And so what you see is not real. But Shivadvaita is kind of, they also say this consciousness is absolute, but they have the concept of Shakti, the Shiva. what we call Brahman in Advaita Vedanta, they call Shakti. I mean, Shiva. And Shiva has a cosmic energy called Shakti, and they attribute both Icha Shakti and Kriya Shakti to Shiva, the consciousness, but Advaita Vedanta does not, So it is, well, they are almost the same. They are in the perspective and how they understood that ultimate reality was slightly different. What I enjoy both, and with Kashmir Sadhus, for example, when you're looking at this big mountain, you would Advaita Vedanta say that's just an illusion, just an appearance. There is really no mountain, But if you go look at here, listen to Kashmir Sadhus, and they will say, oh, it's Shiva himself appearing as that mountain. Shiva solidified as a mountain. And you look at the river Ganga, they will say the Shiva is flowing like the river Ganga. So in a way, I feel that, at the face value, it seems like Kashmir is inclusive, like it synthesizes everything, whereas Advaita Vedanta in a way negates, and not this, not this, not that, but they said this too, this too, this too, So that's in a way the difference between Kashmir and Advaita Vedanta. But if you look at Buddhism now, the Zen Buddhism, so Zen has come from actually is a type of Buddhism, I think Mahayana Buddhism, and Bodhidharma was actually a Pallava. The story goes that he was a Pallava king, from South India. He traveled all the way to Tibet and China, and that brought to Buddhism there. And so it's actually Zen is like Khan or Dhyan, so that's how it kind of morphed. So China and Japan is very popular, and in the US too, Zen Buddhism is quite popular. Now, Zen and Buddhism in general and Advaita Vedanta, pretty much, they have the same roots in India, Okay. They both believe that in a strong logic and reasoning. In fact, if you look at the arguments that Shankara used, or Gaudapada and Manu Kashyapa, they're using the same sort of arguments to establish the point of non-duality like the Buddhists did, So they kind of borrowed a lot of that from there. Ultimately, though, the way there's some still, although they have the same way of reasoning and reuse some of the concepts, they're fundamentally different in a couple of things. Advaita Vedanta talks about homogeneous substance that's unchanging, immutable, indivisible, Brahman, consciousness alone is real. They don't believe in unhomogeneous, unchanging substance. They say everything is empty, emptiness, shunyata, they say, because they say they believe in discrete little particles coming together, organizing themselves into shapes and forms. So really, at the bottom line, for example, take a flower. You say that the flower, you say a flower, but it's only a concept. It's a notion. Remove the petals, remove the pollen, remove the stalk. There is no flower, and that's emptiness. So they say form is empty, whereas these guys, so everything according to Buddhism is this, ultimately it's only interdependent origination. One thing depends on the other. In reality, there's emptiness, there's nothing, And Advaita will say, okay, well, there's something there that's saying there's nothing, So there is a consciousness that must be present even to say whether something's present or not. In a way, the difference. They're both beautiful, I think it's just Buddhism, they take you almost to that, For example, when they say emptiness, if you use some of the Prakriya's techniques, and you will really use them to establish Shankara's point that everything is an illusion, it works beautiful. This whole technique of how you remove interdependent origination, you ultimately end up there, but whether you say it's emptiness or you say it's consciousness, it's up to you, whatever your experiences, Yeah. I hope I answered your question.
Yes,
I can ramble on about this.
Wonderful.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And I have a follow-up question. You mentioned about logical and reasoning, and now we see everything is scientific world, scientific development, and science has advanced so much. Could you tell us a bit about the uniqueness of Advaita Siddhanta that makes it more appealing to today's scientific-minded people and world?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it's just amazing. So the Upanishads had those like sutra type of aphorisms, right? Then Shankara came along and he expanded on it and created an entire science. The absolute reasoning, the logic with which he established one point after the other. Sometimes when I read that, I think it's like a algorithm, a software algorithm, how it goes on to, it's so logical, so real. And a science, and people now, intellectuals especially, they will understand that, There is a lot of myth around Advaita Vedanta. They think it's religion, and religion caused a lot of damage in the world in the name of God. There's been crusades and all kinds of things. So somehow they club Upanishads and this whole thing also into religion. It's not a religion. It's totally not a religion. It is about your experience. It invites you to come, try it out, experience for yourself. This is the beauty of Advaita Vedanta, or even Buddhism, where they're not asking you to blindly take what the religion, like, here's a book, one single book, and this is it, this is God. Go follow the advice and the instruction. That's not what this is. So for the intellectual, the modern intellectual, all these engineers, even at work, often I've had this impulse, and that's why I went and gave that course and put together this 2-hour workshop on it. But how well these engineers whose brains are trained and to be refined, can grasp this. If you give it to them, if you can remove the myth out of it and then present it, I think it's really wonderful. Especially, the science and technology so far, it's now with quantum mechanics, things are changing, but the physical sciences are based on a relative reality, whereas the quantum physics is looking at a different reality, which is the reality really, it's not relative in a way, but they haven't fully peeled out all the layers of the onion. They have yet to get to it. But I think if Shankara was present today, he would understand quantum physics just like that. And if somebody from the quantum physics world who read that, try to start exploring Shankara Advaita or Advaita in general, they will totally, many aha moments would go off. So I think that Advaita Vedanta is more relevant now than ever before. Both, it won't solve world hunger problems like you said, but it will help the individuals, change the individual's perspective, and the suffering that the individual, emotional suffering in the, he'll be liberated from that. So I really think the important thing, I think, is to make sure for all of us, and Advaita Academy is doing an awesome job to bring that knowledge to the common man. I don't think it's a common man, like off the street, anybody, because there is the whole literature, scriptures talk about qualifications. So this Advaita Vedanta will go over your head and you say, what the hell are you talking about? You need, but to inculcate that, at least for those who are thinking more deeply, and are curious to know what the truth is, if we can bring that knowledge, ancient knowledge, and give it to them in a format that they can understand, I think it will be very relevant, very useful. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, it is wonderfully put together. Thank you for that wonderful answer. And Padmaji, there is a misunderstanding in some people that if they read some books about Vedanta or some concept, they will know everything. And as you already mentioned, you have been a prolific reader, and you have also been a student of a great master and guru. So the question is, does one need a guru, or can they learn on their own? What are your observations?
I think both. I think you need a teacher, an enlightened teacher, and you need to do self-study. It's not one or the other. Personally, that's what helps me. Like I said already, I started reading Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita years ago. I read it. I enjoyed the concept, I thrilled at the poetic descriptions, but it didn't sink in. It was only after Ellen Rajagaru came into my life and hearing him, and talk, like, when you read something, there are two levels, Ellen Rajagaru would say. You would just take Vakyatam, just look at the words and the meaning, and then there's a what's the lakshya? What is the intent of the author? What was the intent of the rishi when he made that statement? If you just take it at a face value, you will get just the face value. to get deeper, even with Karma Yoga, for example. When I heard about Karma Yoga the first time many years ago, my understanding of Karma Yoga, you go to save the world, go out and do. No, now it's changed. It is Karma Yoga is an attitude. It's not about what to do, but how often do we understand it like that, And I think so. I really think that you need a teacher. It's in the olden days, Gurukulams were there, you lived with the teacher, you learned from the teacher. But now you don't have the luxury, so you have awesome media, Advaita Academy is posting tons of great content out there. So people should read, even that's the guru, wherever you get a teaching, to my mind, that's the teaching, that's the guru. But if you're lucky enough to find somebody like Elanraj Garu, Srinivasa Rao Garu, then your life is, you're blessed, but you listen, the whole, the scripture says, Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Sravana and Manana is about listening, reading, and then Manana is where you go to your teacher and ask questions and clarify so you have no doubts about it. And Nididhyasana, you're on your own. So Sravana, Manana, you need a teacher. Nididhyasana is where you're internalizing the teaching. So there you're on your own, but I think you really need a teacher. The teacher doesn't have to be a person in person, because the teacher, who is a guru? Guru is not a form. The guru is consciousness itself appearing as a teacher. So with that attitude, we have to be open and we will learn. And but when we read something on our own, our vasanas, our own samskaras, come up and provide a meaning, which is so not real, But if you go to an enlightened teacher like Elanraj Garu or even B. Shankara's Bhashya, really with a lot of attention, your understanding is different. I cannot claim that I understood all the scriptures yet, because every time I read, it's a new perspective, new perspective, fresh outlook. The teaching and the learning is a continuous process. You need a book, you need to do self-studies, but you need a teacher. So that's what my experience is.
Yeah, I think even the tradition says the same. You need a guru to re-establish what has been taught, because of our own misunderstandings, we may misinterpret some sentences and totally take the wrong path itself.
Yes. Yeah,
and you mentioned about you have also translated Shri Srinivasa Rao ji's talks from Telugu into English. Tell us how you managed to bring these thoughts into English, since the words, the idioms, and the cultural references, the Sanskrit itself, is most of the terms are not translatable or is absent in English. So how did you approach this task?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Manu. And it was certainly a challenge for me. I've been reading a lot, right? And I've also been listening to Western philosophers. In the West, there are some really good ones now, like Rupert Spira, Francis Lucille. All of these are great masters, and I've been reading and listening to them. So the jargon I became a little familiar with how the concepts are presented in English. So for example, Jiva, like the separate self. So there's certain terminology that I kind of got it just by reading it. And Elanraj Garu, I've been listening for 15 years, so I was familiar with the subject there. But the challenge is just the mechanics, the logistics, semantics of translating from one language to the other were pretty, I found those pretty challenging. But, I had the advantage of having Dr. Ramesam Vemuri, who is a contemporary, the expert on the subject and third contemporary author. He's a wonderful person, and he's been very patient with me, and he was my kind of coach. And then, of course, Sudhakar, who is the archive of Elanraj Garu's thoughts, who knew Elanraj Garu personally for many, many years. So I kind of leveraged both of these personalities, people in my life who just helped me with it. But the first, so for sure, the Telugu idiom, translating that, finding the right English words were certainly a challenge. And I remember the first chapter that I translated was so bad. This was a bumpy start, right? And I sent it to Ramesan and said, you know what? He told me, just back off, and go read some of Ramakrishna Mission, like Swami Gambhirananda,
Yes, yes.
Nikhilananda's books, and just focus on that. And that was such a wonderful advice that Ramesan gave me. So I went back and started. I said, okay, I'm not going to write. Although I read it before, some of them, not all of them. Now I'm reading it with a different intention. So I spent a whole month or two just reading and noticing how they present it, and then I got it, somewhat. But it was an evolutionary process, and I think, eventually I think it's done now and it has been published in those, but it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge, especially. I'll tell you what is so important. What drove me to do this even was because I just felt that Ellen Rajguru's wisdom is kind of locked up in Telugu, and really it was important to bring it out to everybody else, so everybody else can enjoy, read, and learn from him. So that's what drove me to it. And even the language, I'm trying to, if you look at even some of the Swamiji's books, it's very heavy, Advaita is a heavy subject, and the language also gets a bit complicated. So, trying to simplify that was another big challenge. I don't know if I achieved it, but yeah, it was not an easy task, but I think I'm learning as I go along. I don't think I've learned it already.
That is quite a journey that you have.
Yeah, it
yes,
definitely is.
And could you tell us a bit about your latest work, the Not To, the Essence of Non-Duality? What is it about?
Yeah. So this is a book here. This is the one that I've been translated. This is actually Jagadguru Mahopadesam. It's a book written by Ellen Rajguru. It's not a talk, Manu. It is actually a book written in Telugu by Ellen Rajguru, which I had translated. And again, with the help of the doctor and Ramesan Garu, that the book came to be. And it is basically, what Ellen Rajguru did is a wonderful job of pulling together all the basic concepts of Advaita Vedanta into the 6 beautiful chapters, So he talks about, so if you want to know, for someone who is interested in Advaita Vedanta, who already has some familiarity, I mean, not everybody can read the book. It's certainly not a New York bestseller. This is something very few people are going to read. But for those who are interested, it's in one place. It's like a one-stop shop for all Advaita Vedanta, Shankara's Advaita Vedanta concepts are all encapsulated in that. So that's what the book is about. And I think what I would like to do is just read this little quotations from Ellen Rajguru. It summarizes, what this is, why he has written this book, and why he even spent so much energy. Even at the age of 80, he was talking non-stop and giving this subject. So he says, this royal path, Advaita, revealed by the sages of yore, is now in danger of being closed. The bylanes are being taken for the royal path. Our effort now is to make people realize that these diversions from the royal road will lead them nowhere. Life's real problem is now solved with these shortcuts to spirituality. These shortcuts will only endanger the seeker. This is a movement for the propagation of the true Vedantic wisdom, the legacy left behind by Shankar Bhagavad Father, the timeless knowledge that is eminently adaptable to the modern time. This is what he writes. So this is what kind of inspired me to take on this work as well. And I think the more important thing, and I started saying that earlier, that non-duality is becoming quite gaining momentum in the West. Certainly is gaining momentum. And there's some really great Western teachers, contemporary teachers like Rupert and Francis and James Schwartz, who are teaching Advaita Vedanta. But what is happening though, the traditional Advaita Vedanta is not as popular. Is the Western philosophies, the direct path, the Neo-Advaita, these are becoming much more prominent or much more popular. And I think these are being presented as direct path, and so this is direct, whereas, and this is easier. Whereas the traditional Advaita of Shankara is a progressive path, it can take you a while to get there. Whereas this is instance, no, not instant, I'm exaggerating and kind of, which is not true because they have a point. Their Prakti has a beautiful, it's a direct path is started by Atman and the Krishnamenon, and so this is, everything is good stuff, but the foundation, it's all coming from the old wisdom Advaita Vedanta. And I really, really think that it's so important for us, like we've discussed it already, to bring that in a format that's easily understood by the people, by everybody, by the seekers in the West, because I feel that the direct path and all, they talk about what their experience is, that they're saying you are awareness, you are consciousness, but what about this reality that I live in? My experience is I've seen duality. So this whole thing about the panchadoshas and the gunas, and none of that is addressed at all, And I see when I listen to some of the questions out there for people that, oh, how only they understood this, if they only had the knowledge of Shankara Advaita, they wouldn't have asked that question, So I think this book that that with the help of, when I can't say I wrote this, Ellen Rajagaru's book, which I just happened, has a great opportunity to translate, is trying to address that. I try to come up with a simple language that is to understand, really simplify, not have complex sentences and all. But the subject is complex,
Yes.
It's a complicated subject, but if you write it in a way that's even more complicated, you're not going to engage that Westerner or even Indians. Not everybody reads Sanskrit. Like having heavy Sanskrit jargon. Sanskrit slokas. I've had debates with Ramasangaru also. The traditional Advaitas, the die-hard Advaitas would want authentication. Yeah, where did this come from? Right. So you want to quote and give all the Sanskrit verses and reference where it came from, but you're losing the other reader. Who really wants the subject. So it's trying to find what the right balance is, and I don't think I found it in this book. But I am still a learner. I'm a student. So
we are all a student. Yes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's a good attitude to have. Otherwise, if your cup is full, Amma, who's my guru too, she would say, Amata Vritanandamayi, Satyasai Baba, Siddheshwaranda Bharti, were some of the teachers who had the most influence on it. Amma would say, if your cup is full, I can't pour anymore. Empty it up, then I can pour, So yes. It's good to be hollow. So, like the flute, so you bring out there's more to learn.
And where can we find this book? If our viewers are interested, where can they find this book?
Which book?
The Not To. Yes, your book.
The Not To book? Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's on Amazon.com. It's on Amazon.in in India and UK as well. Yeah.
I think our viewers would be definitely, interested and benefited from this.
Yes,
definitely.
Right. Now, I do hope people, will read it and the message resonates with it. But I'm sure there's going to be another edition, where I would need to improve it. I already know there's some issues with where we can fix it. It's a continuous improvement process. So.
Okay, thank you. And we're almost towards the end of this interview, and you have had such a wonderful journey towards the Advaita Siddhanta reality. What is the path that a seeker or the seeker of truth should take according to your own experience?
Yeah. I would only quote what the Upanishads and the scripture already said it, that, that the path to knowledge, to moksha, is jnana. Jnana is the knowledge, is the path, So the study of the scriptures and the teacher, the guru, we already talked about it. If you are a serious, honest seeker of truth, then your path is the Jnana Marga, or the Bhakti, say, Karma, all of those will culminate in it. It's such an inclusive path, but that is the path. And as a seeker, again, the scripture said it, that you need to have the desire for truth and the burning desire for liberation. If you have these two, then the journey, things will open up for you, automatically the consciousness will make the way for you to
Yes.
to explore all of that. So I think really an unflinching resolve to learn and to grasp the teaching are really required for us, and once you develop a taste for Advaita, everything else pales into insignificance. I'm really telling you. Once you have this knowledge, everything else looks so not important, And I think that is only comes with more and more Sravana, Manana, and Nidhyasana,
Thank you. That was wonderful interacting with you, Padmaji. Thank you so much. And with this, we conclude the session of Quest. Viewers, please tune into our Advaita Academy Facebook, YouTube channel. We will be soon announcing more events and classes on our platform. Padmaji, thank you for joining us and sharing these thoughts with us and accepting our invitation and joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, and I wish all our viewers and seekers on the path, my co-travelers, perseverance and progress. Yeah. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And with this, we will conclude. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.